Hi, this is guitarist Dennis and I want to welcome you to Bargain Bin Amps number 20. And this time around, we're going to take a look at a controversial tube amp. And it's called the Bugera v22 Infinium. Okay, now, why do I say controversial? And one of the reasons is the mere name Bugera, right? Which is really made by Behringer. And Behringer, you know, has a reputation of copying, you know, popular amps that are much more expensive and making a cheap copy of them. And usually the you know, people say, oh, well, you know, they use cheap components and so on and so on and so on. And reliability, so it doesn't have a very good reputation. However, in Behringer's defense, I will say that I own two Behringer GX 2x12 solid state combo amps, and it's going on probably about almost 20 years, and in all that time I recorded, you know, probably trying to think, probably about 199 albums on those amps, and I've also played gigs with them. And in all that time, never once did I have any issue with one, you know. They were as reliable as could be. So it makes me question, you know, the reputation online of Behringer. But they're also known for decent, affordable gear, you know. Now, of course, you know, other companies who make a similar product for 3 times the price, I don't think they like them very much either. Okay, now, the Bugera v22 Infinium new is about $400, and that's for a 22 watt 2-channel tube amp with effects loop, reverb, presence controls, you know, 3-band EQ, 1x12 combo amp, and it's really kind of unheard of, you know, for a full tube amp like that. I mean, it's got 2 power tubes and I think, you know, 3 12AX7 preamp tubes. Pretty unheard of. And, well, I've read comments online, you know, and then there's the, you know, old fuddy-duddies who say, well, I much prefer my hand-wired Milkman amp that I paid $3,000 for, you know. This is a mere toy in comparison. It's a throwaway amp. Right? Come on, let's be reasonable. I mean, we're talking about a $400 new, you know, tube amp compared to, you know, almost $3,000 tube amp. So, you know, you can't expect it to compete. However, it comes pretty darn close. I'm really quite impressed. And so, used wise, I've seen them from about $295 out used, you know. Now, I will say that supposedly, from reading online, that really old ones, right, did experience some problems, which were ironed out by Bugera, by Behringer, you know. And keep in mind, you know, Behringer has a huge factory, and they create a lot of gear, a lot of amps. So if anyone's going to create a, you know, low-cost tube amp, they would certainly be the ones to do it, and they did. You know, now I read online too, you know, where they compare it, you know, to things like a deluxe reverb, Fender Deluxe Reverb, you know, and that's really, I mean, I've seen, you know, new for about $1,200, you know, $11.99, that kind of thing, $10.99. Used price probably about $700-800, and that's also a 22 watt tube amp from Fender. Also, they mention that it's like a Vox AC-15, or some people have compared it to a Matchless, and that's an expensive amp right there. So as you can see, it's pretty controversial in that, you know, and people love to gang up on Behringer online. I mean, it's hard to believe, really, you know, and the truth is, it's because it doesn't say Fender, you know, or Marshall on the front of it. That's it, you know. And, you know, they say, oh, well, you know, the components they use are cheap, and, you know, it's not well built and things. That hasn't been my experience. Now, I don't know about the components, perhaps, you know. I'm more interested in the sound it creates, you know, not necessarily how it was built, as long as it's reliable. And my experience has been that Behringer stuff is very reliable, surprisingly, you know. I mean, those GX212s I had, I mean, they just kept going, and never an issue, never a problem, you know. And I certainly use them quite a bit. Now, other things. As I read up on it, I thought, boy, you know, $295. I mean, that's the price of a little, you know, Fender X2 combo amp. You know, and that's a little 10-inch speaker and 15 watts, puny. You know, in comparison to here, you're getting a 50 watt 2-channel tube amp with reverb and effects loop. Right? For $400. That's pretty amazing. To be fair, I've seen where the real listed new price, you know, depends on where you get it, of course, can go as much as about $500, $499, something like that. Which is still extraordinary, really, for a tube amp like that. So I decided to take a gamble. There was a used one locally, and it was about, yeah, $295, and I thought, well, you know, surely I'll try it. If I don't like it, I can just resell it. That was my thought. So I got it home. Very first thing I noticed right away is, as far as I can tell, I mean, you know, without really opening it up and looking inside and all the components and things, it feels like a really solid amp. And I mean, I was really impressed with the knobs and things. You know, sometimes they feel cheap and, you know, kind of crackly or something, you know, really crummy. This isn't the case at all. I mean, I was really impressed. They were so smooth, you know, really smooth, you know, potentiometers in there, you know, the knobs and things. And it has a standby switch, you know, and a power switch, and those are real heavy duty too, you know. I mean, I was expecting, like, you know, plastic switches, but that's not the case at all. Another thing is, and this is missing from a lot of tube amps, for extension cabinets, it has a, you know, an impedance selector for 4 ohm, 8 ohm, 16 ohm. And that's really great, because then you can use just about any external cabinet you'd want, you know. Then, of course, the effects loop, and that's another thing that you just wouldn't find. And it's a darn good-looking amp, in my opinion. And what I found striking is how similar the cabinet design, and I wonder if it's not made in the same factory, or at least designed by the same people, because the Black Star cabinet is very similar, almost identical. The Bugera one's a little smaller than the Black Star HT Club 40 in particular. But what I did notice, I mean, that's uncanny. I'm sorry. I find that very suspicious that it's not made in the same factory, or at least designed by the same people. That the top of the panel on the Black Star HT Club 40, on each side has a little notch. Okay? Yeah. On each side, and that's where the tone controls are. And there's a little notch in the wood there. Right? Well, guess what? Identical on the Bugera. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was like the same little notch there on each side, you know, on the Bugera. That's uncanny. How's that possible? Well, anyway, for $295, I thought, well, you know, I just had to try something like that. Even though I read, you know, the saps online, a lot of them were talking nonsense. I mean, just stupid stuff. You know, saying, because they had Bugera on the name, and right off the bat, you know, they're going, oh, that's barren grass, no good, blah, 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 blah. Turns out, you know, you get a lot for your money. Without a doubt. Now here's what happened. It's, by the way, the amps, weight-wise, is pretty heavy, actually. It's about 42 pounds. You know, I mean, it's reasonable. Don't get me wrong. You know, whereas I find something like a Fender Twin is not reasonable. I mean, that thing is ungodly heavy. And, you know, toting that around on a gig, you know, it would be very hard, especially if you're playing in stereo and you need 2 of them. You know, that'd be crazy heavy. So, but here it's about 42 pounds. A lot of it has to do with the cabinet, you know. I think it's like particle board. I did see that they do make a replacement pine cabinet, you know. You know, Woodworker made it, I think. And they're selling those for about $195. So if weight really was an issue for you, that's one option, you know. But I mean, it's not, you know, it's not crazy heavy at all. I mean, I suppose it depends how far you're taking it, you know. But I mean, you know, from car to a venue or something, you know, that's no problem. I mean, I do remember, though, it was the, and even the Fender Deluxe Reverb is really heavy. I found, you know, but I remember there were a couple amps I think one of them was a Fender Twin. And just to get it from my car to the back door of my house was horrendous. It was just so heavy. That was crazy. Okay, so in that sense, it's very good. Man, I'm sorry. I don't know what they're talking about. The build quality sounds really, really good. To me, anyway. You know. And believe it or not, Bugera / Behringer claims that it's hand-wired. You know, and these days, you know, what does that really mean? You know, I mean, a lot of people, you know, it's the PCB boards, you know, instead of this usually wafer board that, you know, they put each component on and so on. They say, oh yeah, it's more easy to be serviced and things. Don't know. Sounds more to me like it's old school, you know, tech, and so of course working on a tube amp's a little simpler than, you know, working with PCB boards and so on. I don't know. You know, but for me that's just not a, you know, I don't want to pay the extra, you know, for that, for labor and things, you know. As long as the amp works and it's reliable, that's, you know, that's all I care about. And this thing seems really solid. I didn't find anything that I thought, man, that's cheap. Not at all. Not one bit. In fact, I was really impressed. Now, you know, for $295 used for a tube amp, I mean, I wasn't expecting much, quite honestly. And when I plugged into it, I wasn't sure what to expect, and I was really pleasantly surprised. Now, I didn't spend too much time on the lead channel, you know, and like most tube amps, you know, it does have a lead channel. I think it's very good, you know, not for, you know, pit of hell death metal or whatever. You know what I mean? For that you'd probably have to add a pedal, you know. But I was really focusing on the clean channel. And as I played it, I was really super impressed. Now, I thought it was for some reason, really bright. You know, and it even has a bright channel on top of the bright. And the mid EQ, really, you might as well call it a volume. Right? Because, you know, if you turn down, scooped out the mids, well, there goes all your volume. So, yeah, in that sense, I found it really weird to get it to sound right, you know. So it took some, oops, that was my cat. So it took some really working with the dials and things, you know. Immediately got this really nice warm sound, very much kind of a cross between a Fender and a PB Classic 30, which is more kind of a Marshall-y type of clean tone. But I was surprised at how Fender-y it sounded for that kind of amp. You know, it didn't have all the chime of a Fender, I suppose. But it's really kind of a cross between the two. It's right in the middle. And I thought, man, that's a really, really nice tone. I just wish it was a little fatter and louder, thicker sounding a little bit. And, you know, for 51, I was thinking, man, you know, maybe it's the speaker. maybe you gotta replace the speaker, right? So I did a whole video and all this stuff, and I'm revising it now, because guess what? Guess what I discovered? And I didn't know it at the time. I kind of discovered it. And that is that on the back of the amp, there's a triode and a pentode switch. And when you're in triode mode, which it was, it's half power. And that's exactly what I thought at the time. I thought, you know, this would be such an awesome amp. You could get the really, really big amp sound, you know, kind of like a deluxe reverb would give you. You know, something with a lot of watts and real clear and real clean and so on. And I wasn't really getting that. I mean, I thought that you could. It sounded like you could. You know, and that's why I thought, well, maybe, you know. But when I turned up, you know, turned it up louder and things, that, you know, the speaker would kind of fart out and, you know, excuse me. Especially on the low end and things, and like it couldn't handle the volume, and I'm going, man, that's the one, you know, kind of to be expected for that price of an amp. Little did I know that everything I had mentioned about the amp was in this triode mode, and when I switched it to pentode mode, which is the full power, all of a sudden, man, that amp came alive, and it's exactly what I was looking for. No need to change the speaker. A real nice low end, real warm sound, real big, real clear, you know. Before, in the triode mode, it kind of reminded me of the little Fender X2, you know. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Fender X2. But it's a small amp with a small, kind of small sound, really. You know, certainly didn't compete with my Blackstar HT Club 40s. You know, those I consider a big amp with a big sound, you know, 40 watt tube power amp section anyway. You know. But man, when you switch it into pentode mode, all of a sudden you get the big tube sound, and it's a great sound. I was blown away, really impressed. And every bit as good as my HT Club 40s, the Black Stars. No joke. You know. And that's saying a lot for a really inexpensive amp. I looked online, you know, for reviews and things, and you could tell right away who's played it and who hasn't. Because when I see the comments now and read them after playing it, right, I realize a lot of the comments, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And not only that, I guarantee you they haven't played the amp, because if they did, they wouldn't post these comments that are kind of generic, you know. Well, you know, you get what you pay for, and, well, there's no, you know, Behringer, it's a toy, it's, you know, the throwaway amp, you know, whereas the Fender is the keeper amp. Ridiculous. I'm sorry, no. No, I've owned, you know, well, the Fender Deluxe Reverb is a great example. I think that this v22, it comes awfully close to that, if not better, you know, in a way. I always found the Deluxe Reverb a little plain. You know, this isn't the case here at all. So, there you go. That's, so I was all proud of myself. I had made the Bargain Bin Amps 20 video, only to delete it you know, the very next day, because I discovered that I was running in half power. And it also, the pentode mode, the full power mode, made the EQ work more like I was expecting. It wasn't quite as bright, you know, and turning down the treble, you know, did that. Whereas in the triode mode, it's a little weird, you know, everything's kind of screwy as far as the working with the EQ and so on. I mean, it's fine. It's great for, you know, kind of bedroom playing, but when you want that real nice big tube clean tone, nothing like the pentode mode. And the amp, you know, seems more, I guess, like what I was not expecting, but hoping for, you know, as far as the way the EQs would work, the presence control. And the nice thing is this amp, that's another thing. Right at the beginning, you know, I thought, you know, like, just like the Black Star, you know, they just had a clean channel control and that was it. But there's actually a master volume too, you know, and so working with those, you can still get a you know, huge sound at a reasonable volume. Now, there's definitely online a bias against the Bugera / Behringer amps for sure. And I think one of the big things is that it doesn't say Fender on it. Or, you know, I don't know, Mezza Boogie, or, you know, any of those big brands, you know, Marshall, Mezza Boogie, on and on and on, Matchless, on things. And the fact that you can even compare this amp to something like that, to, you know, amps that cost 3-4 times as much, is really quite a statement, you know. Now, yeah, even the speaker seemed better in the pentode mode, and part of that's because of the power amp. Yeah, very impressive, very impressive. Now, I read that they say, oh, well, you know, they use cheap tubes there, so you've got to replace the tubes and it'll sound even better. That's possible. Another thing is, of course, replacing the speaker, you know, which originally was my first thought in the triode mode. Because I thought, man, that speaker's just not cutting it. It's not, you know, it could be a great amp, but it's just limited by the speaker. But then switching it to pentode mode, and wow, all of a sudden that was just gone. So really, I mean, you can't switch it out for a better speaker, for sure. There are better speakers, you know, and I'm sure they give you a little bit more low end and things, but I think the speaker in there is not bad at all. It's a turbo sound speaker. It's not bad. It really is quite decent, you know. I mean, you know, replacing a speaker is going to cost you probably, you know, for a decent speaker, probably around anywhere from $70 to $150, if not more, you know, depending on what kind of speaker you want. And I'm sure it could improve the sound, but as it is, it's what I was hoping for, and that was that those 50 watts were real, you know, and you know, that it would give you a big amp sound, you know. For me, I kind of have two categories of amps, you know. The smaller amps, you know, and you get a smaller sound. And sometimes those are good, you know, for coffee house gigs, playing at home, kind of things, you know. You just don't want to, where you don't want to get into, you know, a huge, real loud you know, deep amp sound. You know, I mean, still good sound, but it's small. You know, and then there's the other amps that I consider big amps with a big amp sound, and now those are, for me, you know, PV Classic 30, the 30-watt tube amp, can be very loud, very nice amp. Black Star HD Club 40-watt tube amp. You know, and I would put it in that category, whereas in the half power mode, right, I was kind of like, well, it could be in the big amp category, you know, and I mean, size wise it is, I guess, you know, it's a little small, but it just didn't have the sound of the big amp until I switched that switch, and then it's like, oh my. Then it was in the category of the big amps. So I guess you got the best of both worlds. But I did find the tryout mode. It does something to the controls, the EQ wise. You know, so I mean, I had the mid all the way up, and because it was so bright that I turned down the treble, you know, almost all the way down, and there it got a reasonable tone. But then when I switched it to pentode mode, then it was more of a normal amp, you know. I had the treble about 4 or 5, the mid about the same, and the bass about the same, you know, about 5 o'clock, or maybe a little more, like 7 maybe. And it was great. It was great. So it makes a huge difference. You know, it's not just cutting the power in half. It affects the way the amp controls and things, and the way it sounds too. You know, I found in the triode mode it was awfully bright, and it had a nice tone, you know, for at low volumes. You know, which I guess is the point of it. But when you try to get the larger volumes, you get real disappointed real quick, because you're like, man, it, you know, kind of farts out here and there, and you're thinking, man, if only you had a, you know, nicer speaker or whatever. And then switch it to pentode mode, all that gets cleared up. So there you go. And I mean, listen, I like this amp so much, I'd love to get another one, you know. And yeah, for the money you're spending, I mean, you are getting really 3 or 4 times amp wise, you know, what you could afford with another company. And when you think about it, it's about the same price as a Fender X2, which I love dearly, you know, but it's a small amp. It's a 15-watt, you know, a little combo amp with a 10-inch speaker. You know, here you're getting 50-watt, and it is a real 50-watt, you know, tube amp with a 12-inch speaker. And a pretty darn good one, too. That was another thing I was worried about. I was like, oh man, they're gonna skimp on the speaker, and it's just gonna be a, you know, a trashy speaker. No, not at all. Very, very, very good. Quite impressive. Quite impressive. And as far as, you know, build reliability, from what I read online, and this is, you know, I don't know, because I obviously haven't had it for years, but I read that early on, you know, that they did have some issues with problems with channel switching and things like that, and that in later models that was all taken care of, really, you know. Now I should say I do have a Supro, a very expensive tube amp, and it has an amazing sound, you know, and it does sound a little better than the Bugera, but it's the kind of amp that you don't want to be, you know, playing every day and putting wear and tear on it and that kind of thing, you know, and so the Bugera would serve that purpose very well, you know. Also, you know, if you take it to a gig or something, you know, you don't necessarily want to take $1,000 tube amp, you know, if something happens to it or that kind of thing, just putting wear and tear on it. Whereas I think the Bugera, you know, because it's less expensive, you know, it wouldn't be quite as concerned, you know, if something did happen to it. Hopefully not, of course, but just in case. Alright, so let's take a listen to it. Okay, now I'm in my home studio, and I went ahead and hooked up to the app. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention real quick. One, the Tolex, right? And you've got, along the front, you've got that white Tolex, and it's really nice quality-wise. And the Tolex on top is really nice. You know, I hate to say it, but on the Fender X2, I mean, they did a really cheapo job on the Tolex. Just the folds and things, you know, aren't all that great. Whereas here, it's really nice and smooth. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is the reverb. And this is one thing, even though the Fender Deluxe Reverb, you know, has a tube-driven reverb circuit, you know, I never really liked that reverb sound, you know, kind of washy, you know, it just didn't work for me. Now this is a digital reverb, and I actually like it better, you know, than a real spring reverb, surprisingly. Just sounds better to my ear. It's very organic. That's one way to describe it anyway. So, now, just for fun, here's the so I was playing, you know, in this triode mode. And I thought, well, that's okay, you know. But watch what happens in a pentode mode. You get this suddenly. So you get this really nice kind of deep. Yeah, really nice. You know, big sound.
real warm sound, you know. Yeah, so it's a really nice, balanced sound, you know, it's kind of... Takes pedals really well. Now here's I'm going to use the same Eventide pedal into the straight into the amp, front of the amp. So I'm not going to use the effects loop here. Okay, now here's just a simple delay on it. Now this is all in the neck pickup. If I switch to the bridge, just a kind of really nice tube sound. You don't really even need effects a lot of times. You know, that kind of thing. That kind of... Okay, so there you go. There's the Bugera v22 Infinium. And I think for the money, I think it's a really great deal of an amp. I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this amp, especially for the price. But if I didn't know what kind of brand it was, right? If I didn't know the name, and I just heard that sound and played through it, and you told me that it was an $800 amp, I would totally believe it. You know, and very easily, if not more than that. Because to get that super clean and super clear tone, you know, especially on a tube amp, it's an expensive proposition. Alright, so if you run across one of these, I'd highly recommend that you try it out. Alright, see you next time.